Welcome to Renaissance Charge Videos. I'm Rick Friedrich. Today I want to mention that we're selling a original 20 coiler monopole from back years ago. So I mentioned this very motor from about a customer who actually charged up batteries while he was powering the load to construct a house down somewhere in the States here. Anyway, this customer, I guess, he saw what I said about that the other week, mentioning how he ran his loads in this way, and then he contacted me and said, hey, I have that model for sale if somebody's interested in buying it. And so I thought I'd do a video on mentioning that. So you can, if you want it, it's $7,000. That includes shipping in the United States. Overseas would be a little bit more. It'll be boxed, crated, and delivered by truck. Not Alaska or Hawaii. That would be a lot more money to ship. But anyway, I'll sell this 20 coiler if anybody's interested, and I'll put a link on the website for it. Now, this customer, as I mentioned, was able to have, he had 10 batteries, 24 volts, 10 batteries in parallel. He had 8 of the batteries in parallel for 24 volts. So you have 224 and then 224 behind them and behind them. So he had 4 rows of batteries, and then the other 2 were running the motor. So 24 volts running the motor. So just as I mentioned in the previous video with this case here, when we were doing that with the little tiny battery, or the little tiny motor, you can do the same thing with these motors here. This is the 4-pole, not for sale. Well, it is for sale, but that's not what I'm referring to in this video. So you can see the pictures of the motor, and when he ran this motor, he would have the inverter powering his loads so he could cut wood and do whatever he was doing. And then what he would do was run an inverter off of those loads on the end of the battery, like I mentioned here. In this case, I have it kind of reversed just to show it hooked up. So you have the input going into this top bank of batteries, and then from the motor. So that's the negative charging up the motor. And then, as I mentioned in the previous video, there are 2 cables going all the way back to each battery bank down the line, and then the bottom one would be where, I have it reversed right here, where this inverter would be attached and be the output. So the last battery bank set in the line would be the one that you rotate with the input battery whenever the input battery gets low. And that's what he did. He just swapped them out, ran them. And this was told him by Bedini. He paid a lot of money for Bedini to tell him how to modify the motor to run exactly like his was. So this is the only time you'll ever find an actual Bedini motor that was a monopole that was carefully directed by Bedini himself to customize it. Now, there isn't anything different than what I was selling as regard to parts. The only thing different, as you can see in the original monopole 10 coiler and 6 coiler, was that there were bus bars around in a circular manner for, and each circuit board was right behind the coil. So then you had a better distribution of impedances, so the lines were more equal. Specifically, we found this over time with the trigger part of the circuit, where even on the circuit board itself, the first transistor, if there was 4 of them or 8 of them on the board, the bigger board that we've had, in this case we have 4 circuit boards for 4 wires. This is the same exact coil that Bedini used in his 10 coiler and the 6 coiler. And so it's the same exact circuit and parts. Now, even on even that short of a board, the first transistor, because of the traces, gets more of the current than the second transistor, third and fourth. So ideally, what I've done over the years is actually run equal lengths of wire to each one, rather than use the board which has a trace on it. So, but otherwise than that, there's a big circle, and so you have you know, the positive and negative and charging strip terminals connected directly to that big, you know, to each big bus bar. And so you can see that it's the same arrangement as Bedini. So it's the only time you're ever going to get the opportunity to buy something. You'd never be able to buy the original ones. Whoever has them now, you know, probably John's wife. But anyway, so this is the one that this customer of mine asked him, paid him a lot of money, said, what should I do to make this existing more like yours? And this is exactly what Bedini told him to do. He did it, and it actually worked, which I've been saying all along. I'm not saying that Bedini was ever lying about his claims on the motors. I've always verified those before I even got involved with him. So my controversy with Bedini was not about the actual performance of these motors, but other things. Anyway, so this is available for $7,000, and it will be created to anywhere in the United States, the lower 48 states, not Hawaii or Alaska. That would be more money to ship, or overseas. So if you want it, click the link in the description of this video. You can see the pictures, and you could modify this to run at higher voltages if you wanted to. You could do the same things that we're talking about in the recent videos, where you're running the third stage process. And people since I've been talking about this more recently, people have been getting out their old monopoles and being able to do what I've been talking about recently with the negative energy engineering, and getting back to the multiple battery charging, the large battery banks. So in this case, I'm using golf cart batteries that are about 200 amp hour each. And anyway, so this is a 20 coiler. The 10 coiler was about $4,000 unassembled. And so you're getting this assembled, and 2 of them for $7,000, including the shipping. And it's, like I said, assembled in a very, very neat, organized way, professional way. And it was used and tuned and everything ready to go. So it was used successfully, is what I'm saying. It wasn't just put together and they didn't know what they were doing. They were directed by Bedini to do that. So I mean, I did the same thing with various customers over the years, but this one was specifically instructed, assembled with Bedini's instruction. So this is a chance to do this one time, and I figured I'd do a video rather than just put a link up there. You know, for people to look at the details. And if you want to contact me, call me up through the phone number on the website, r-charge.com or .net. And you can call me up if you want to, but there's really nothing more I can say beyond what I'm saying here in this video. I'm trying to think of if there's anything else. I don't have it here to demonstrate it for you. I figure I don't really need to do that. There's going to be several people that are probably interested in grabbing that. So anyway, what you can do with it, like I said, you can do the charging in that method. The idea of the whole system that's really manifest in the monopole patent from Bedini, and if people really paid attention to what he was saying, although it was very hard to follow him because he was all over the place and deliberately wrote a whole bunch of information to kind of confuse people. He said that, so I'm not, and I have that recorded, so don't give me a dislike for saying that, because I knew him better than almost anybody, especially in these matters. And he deliberately made it a challenge for people. Let's just say that in a positive way. He wanted people to dig for the information, work for it. He was somebody who left things in plain sight, clues, hints, made it a puzzle. He was somebody who was always trying to make a mystery out of things, make it more mystical than it really was. But in essence, he was kind of leaving it for those who could sort through all the extra filler words that he was saying to find the nuggets. And of course, that was me. And he used to laugh and smile at me. He had a big grin when I would solve his little riddles that he would put on his webpage. And then he would say, "See, Rick, you're the only one." Now, he probably said that to other people too, but he was really trying to do that sort of thing all the time. And so when you go back, you find that he did cover his bases, he did say things, but you had to sort through all the drama, all the storytelling to figure out what was important. Of course, I was the opposite, and I was the demystifier of things. And so I got practical with things, right? And rather than tell stories about things that people could never verify for themselves, I'm saying, hey, here's how to do it. Here's a demonstration of it. Nothing special, nothing hidden, nothing more special than what you can do yourself on a very small scale with almost for free, as I've shown in the past. So anyway, Bedini talked about things like the third stage process. There are some diagrams I've seen that he posted over the years. If you go through all of Bearden's stuff and all of his writings over the years, and you see from energy from the vacuum, you can kind of read between the lines. For me, I was working on this stuff, you know, as like pretty much the main engineer on this stuff for some years. And, you know, Bearden acknowledged that in some of his correspondence. And he said that personally to me, of course. He knew that. So I understood all the lingo, is what I'm getting at, in the Energy from the Vacuum book. Not that I'm some physicist or understand all the math or all that, but I you know, was able to do all these things that they mention in that book. And that's the biggest focus of that book, is these types of systems. So so I've done that, and so many different ways over the years. But as more of a historian than any kind of scientist, I'm merely a hobbyist and all this stuff. But as more of a historian, I look at the details of what is said and what is presented and when it's presented. And so I have looked over all the details, much of which is not available to the public. But I've looked over everything over time and noticed when things were shared, what patents were issued, provisional patents and all that. So I can say this, that Bedini did cover his bases. He did say things and give an abundance of information to allow you to go off the grid, not in necessarily the easiest way, in the sense of financially, you're going to have to pay for parts. And in this case, what he was showing was charging a large battery bank, and negatively charging a large battery bank will give you, a huge output. Now, the cost of the battery bank is what you have to swallow, what you have to pay for. Never mind even the over unity device itself that creates the negative energy. That's actually a minimal cost to the size of the compared to the size of the batteries. But if you can find, large battery banks, which you can here and there, now that we sell the rejuvenators over the last 14 and a half years, 12 and a half years, sorry. There are many people around the world rejuvenating batteries, and they're grabbing up the old batteries, so it's harder to come by them now because people are doing that as a business. But you can still find them here and there, and once they're rejuvenated, you can begin the negative energy charging process. And like I said, it's not merely in batteries that this has been shown by Bedini even himself. If you go back to the booklet that I was publishing and printing for people, which was the Tesla switch and the Comrie generator booklet, the Tesla switch excuse me, was not the full Tesla switch was not good for the batteries because it was going back and forth, pushing the battery from charge to load. But you can see in that booklet the half Tesla switch. So in that, you can see the concept of the third stage process, where you have this transformer. Well, it's actually not even the negative side of the circuit, but he was showing a number of things there, and over the years, when you combine that knowledge with the negative side of the output of the charging battery to the charging battery, you have in some of these diagrams transformers that are running high wattage light bulbs, that are incandescent bulbs or what have you. They are resistive loads that were run, and they were run cold and so forth. So you can see this over the years, and it's not something that I created by any means. I'm not saying that I did, but charging up a battery and running series impedances other than batteries is possible. For example, inductors and resistors themselves, but inductors, transformers, and what have you. So that's what can be done with these motors when you have the very high spike in the non-positive energy flow. So you have to get that distinguished in your head, the difference between the positive charging and the negative, because if you're going to pulse an inductor with the positive current, then you're going to get the same results that you get when you pulse an inductor with positive current. There's nothing real special about that except the back EMF, the reverse voltage, is negative energy. And if you gate that out, you can do this negative energy engineering. But again, people are not familiar with that. They're not expecting it to be any different than the positive current, so they're always expecting a loss there. They don't even consider it beforehand. Well, why would they if there's always a loss? If it's just reverse current and it's still current, then there's nothing there to consider. And of course, as we were talking about in recent videos, if it's obeying Kirchhoff's laws or rules, then there shouldn't be any excess there in the reverse. There shouldn't be any usable energy. And that's why it's not used, because you still have the forward current, which makes up the sum of the whole, and the line resistances make up the whole, all the power losses. But then you have this reverse current that is not a loss, and it's negative, and it's completely opposite than positive current, and it's equal, but it's not dissipative, and that's the thing. So there's no loss in it. It becomes a negative resistance. So you can do all that. What I'm getting at, I'm not going to say the whole thing that I said in the last video about this, but you can do all that with that system, with the 20 coiler. And I would first, if you were going to do something like that, get used to doing it on a small scale. And you can turn each individual coil off. Of course, it will have a different tuning when you have a master coil that always has to be on for the system to work. And then you flip through, you'll see 20 switches on the front of the system, and it will turn off each individual trigger on each coil. Well, the trigger to each coil, I should say. And there's one trigger coil on the first 10 coiler, in which then is doing all the rest, as far as I remember, unless there's 2 trigger coils on each one, but there should only be 1. So then what happens is you can turn off each one of them for running it at less power, and there's not going to be very much drag on the rotor itself. But I would always recommend, before you do that third stage process, that you run 1 coil first, if you can run the motor with only 1 coil. Right now it's set up where all the gaps are positioned in the right location, right gap, and then everything's tuned, I believe, for 24 volts. So I would take note of that before you change. Like when you run only 1 coil, you usually just loosen up all the other coils and move them out, so that they're not creating any drag on the rotation of the motor. And then you just run the 1 coil to do your experiments. But it'd be better just to do another, experiment with another system that was smaller, that you could learn from first before you try and do this process. Because, like as I've said before, the energy is really amplified back into the input when you have these series impedances that are inductors. And so you're doing something similar but quite a bit different to just charging the batteries. So that's what you can do with that system. And really, if you get the series impedances just right, I would say you would probably, to do this effectively, you want to change the transistors to a higher voltage. I mean, really, those transistors were only being used in that system to run voltage, which their maximum is 250 volts. So if you're going above that with the spike, you risk damaging the transistor. And when we've done that negative engineering with the third stage process, as I've called it, series impedances, then series of negative impedances, what happens is the return voltage is quite high from that, as you can see, as I've shown with the oscilloscope. And so you can damage the transistors pretty fast. So since you're not pushing the amperage, when that is a 200 watt device, that MJL transistor, therefore you could go and get the same sort of device in the same package and replace that with a higher voltage transistor, you know, at least 1,000 volts, or I mean, if you can get up into like 10,000 volts or some range like that, you're going to be more capable of handling this reverse pulse. Or, as I've been showing with various capacitors across the MOSFET or transistor and the TVS diode to short it out, which is, I'm still redoing the video on showing that with the mini kit, and then we'll be showing it on this one afterwards. I'm just trying to get the time to do that. But anyway, if you do that with the monopole system, then you can protect the transistors from blowing out themselves, and then you can just go way up there in voltage. So that's really what your options are. So I thought I would do this video. It's a little bit longer than I was planning to do because I wanted to give a little bit of background of what you can do with it. But let me know. It will probably go pretty quickly. As soon as it goes, I'll pull this video off because I don't want people trying to look for it and say, where is it, over the years, if it's no longer for sale. So it's your opportunity to get it, think about it, and let me know, or just purchase it online. And I will do what I can to figure out an estimate. If you're overseas and you buy it, then it's not going to include any shipping charge on it. And then I'll have to evaluate how much extra it's going to cost for shipping. It may not be anything. I'll see really what the cost is. But if you're going to order it overseas, realize that there very well will likely be another shipping cost, and it could be easily $500 depending on where you're at. I mean, if it goes to South Africa or Africa anywhere, it will be really expensive. So probably don't even think about it. So anyway, that's enough for now. I think that should cover everything, and thanks for watching.